Mark, sometimes you don't need analytical data to tell you the story. Just look at the situation, find the trend, and make the decision.
Tyler Boyd's dip in production last year better correlates with Andy Dalton being off the field than it does with A.J. Green being off the field, despite public perception.
You can't watch just highlight film because highlight film only shows the good things. Watch the player's actual game tape because you see the good and the bad.
In 7 games in 2018, where all 3 starting Rams receivers were healthy, Brandon Cooks led the trio in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and total PPR points by a considerable margin.
It's a beautiful day for football. Welcome into the RotoBros Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Chris McConnell.
I'm Mark Wemken.
And we are not alone tonight.
You're listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Subscribe, listen, take home the title.
What's up, Takeaway Nation and RotoBroskis? Joe and I are here to spice up this show a little bit.
Yeah, our brothers from another podcast joining us tonight, guys. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us, joining us for about the next hour or so. Like Murphy Hamilton mentioned, we've got the guys from our friends from the Fantasy Takeaway podcast, Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock. Gentlemen, what's going on?
New Year's is kicking my butt a little bit, but we're going to make it through this thing. I promise.
Question, am I the only one on this show not a little hungover right now?
I think so.
Yes.
I don't know about Chris.
That's a bad sign. It's a bad sign, gentlemen.
I had about 15 too many Natter Days last night.
That's a terrible thing to drink, Mark. You should get your life together.
Dude, Natter Days are freaking awesome, all right? It was like Monday evening at like 10 o'clock. I was walking through Meijer trying to decide what I wanted to drink on New Year's Eve, and I had Bud Light in my cart, and then I walked past Natter Days on sale for $8.99, and I'm like, all right, it's Natter Day season.
Well, he's obviously not that drunk because he and I have been telling people all day that George Kittle is the best overall tight end in the NFL, and nobody seems to believe us, and it's weird. But I mean, I think Mark's a little less drunk than what he leads on.
Hungover, I'm not drunk anymore.
Okay, touche.
They're not that drunk. They're not that drunk.
All right, guys. Hey, we got a big show for everyone tonight. We're doing a two-part, fellas. We're doing a two-part show here. So we're going to do a year in review series, right? So we're going to start tonight with quarterbacks and tight ends. We're going to talk about quarterbacks and tight ends. We're going to talk about quarterbacks that did us right in 2019. We're going to talk about quarterbacks that did us wrong in 2019. Quarterbacks that we want to see project well into 2020, ones that we don't believe will project well into 2020. And we're going to do the same thing for tight ends, but next week, we're also going to do the same thing for running backs and wide receivers, so you definitely don't want to miss that show as well. So the RotoBros Fantasy Takeaway 2019 year in review. Let's kick this thing off, fellas. We've got a lot of stuff to get to. We'll start with some coaching news, because obviously Black Monday just kind of rolled past earlier this week. So there are some coaching changes happening around the league. We won't spend too much time on it, but there's a lot of stuff I think that could obviously affect some players next season. The biggest one, I think, and the one that needed to happen the most, Freddie Kitchens fired from the Cleveland Browns. The general manager, John Dorsey, also fired as well. So the Browns cleaning house for like the millionth time this decade. So it's interesting, and I think this is really a good thing for the entire offense. I think we'd probably all agree with that.
Chris, I want to stop you real quick, and I want to take offense to something you said. You said the thing that needed to happen the most. The thing that needs to happen the most is Jason Garrett getting fired. So,
I'm going to one up you. I'm going to one up you. The thing that needs to happen the most is Adam Gase needs to get fired, and then we'll go to Jason Garrett, and then we'll hit Freddie Kitchens. So there's our top three. One of them's down.
Why not all three?
I think I'm with Chris in that order. For the Dallas Cowboys to finish 8-8 while averaging the most yards per play in the NFL this year, and the most net yards per pass attempt, like they were that offense was electric, and for them to only win 8 games with a decent defense, unacceptable.
Dude, they had the 5th most yards all time for any offense in NFL history. Like the 2000 Rams, 2013 Denver Broncos, New Orleans Saints in 2011, and the Miami Dolphins in 1984 are the only better offenses in terms of total yards than that team was this year.
And what's funny is not only are they not in the playoffs, because, okay, look, that's one thing. You do all this, you have these dank stats that we were talking about earlier, and you're not in the playoffs. But you're not in the playoffs, but your division rival that has like zero, that's putting a quarterback at the receiver spot in some packages, is the division title, is the division champ, and is in the playoffs this week against the Seahawks. Like, that's the most amazing, most criminal thing about the 2019 Cowboys. All these great stats are wonderful, but it's amazing that when you compare them to what the Eagles have been put through on the offensive side of the ball, I think it really goes back to the Eagles coaching. And this just shows how good Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz and that offense as a whole can be.
People call for Doug Peterson's job once a season. I swear to God, once a season. Even the Super Bowl year. They always
start so slow. That's the problem.
Yeah, even the Super Bowl year, we get people saying, all right, I think it's time to move on from Doug Peterson. And I'm like, you're freaking nuts. All this dude does is win. Like,
remember when everybody wanted to move on from Sean Payton after 3 straight 7-9 years? Could you imagine if the Saints had fired Sean Payton? This is what happens when you give a coach patience, like you're patient with a head coach.
We have people here in Chicago that already want to move on from Matt Nagy, and I got nothing for him. Like, the dude's 20-12 in his first 2 years as a head coach, and you already want, like, do you not remember what kind of mediocrity you were dealing with Mark Trestman and Lovie Smith and John Fox, and you already want to fire a head coach who's 8 games over 500 through 2 years? Knock it off. Get real.
That's the same kind of thinking that leads you to get rid of Robbie Gould, too.
Yeah, it's exactly that. This is one of the most horribly run organizations in the NFL. I don't think it's quite up there with the Redskins and the Jets, or the Jaguars for that matter, but it's getting there.
Well, I was thinking of a great segue to the Redskins, and Mark just gave it to me, so thanks for that softball. Ron Rivera is the new head coach of the Redskins. They are cleaning house as well. Bruce Allen is out as well, and that's been a long decade of Bruce Allen football, so I know Redskins fans are excited for that. This is a great hire, I think, for the Redskins. This is one of the teams that I think needs one of, we talked about the Browns, and needing to get Kitchens out and Dorsey out and try to get an adult in the room. The Redskins really need the same thing. Now, things may not change ultimately until Dan Snyder, relinquishes some power or sells the team to somebody else. But Ron, this is a great hire for them. So we'll see what happens there. Jack Del Rio is on as his defensive coordinator now. So you would think that with the second overall pick, Chase Young is all but locked into that second choice there. And Pat Shurmur, another NFC East division team. Pat Shurmur for the Giants has been fired as well, so he is out. GM Dave Gettleman is safe. So we'll see what lies in the future for the Giants. They are going to be, I think they're interviewing Mike McCarthy tomorrow, actually. So by the time everyone hears this show, they probably already interviewed Mike McCarthy. So we'll see how that goes. I think Matt Rule, though, the Baylor head coach Matt Rule is probably the favorite for that job.
I would love to see Mike McCarthy coach a young quarterback. I would love to see him get a hold of either Dwayne Haskins or Baker Mayfield. He's not going to get a hold of Haskins, obviously. That's going to be Ron Rivera's job now. But I would love to see him get a hold of a young, talented quarterback. And that's why I was always hoping he would go to Cleveland and get his hands on Baker Mayfield. Just because I do think he played a massive role in developing Aaron Rodgers into who he became. Obviously, Rodgers is one of the most talented quarterbacks we've ever seen. But I genuinely believe Baker has the natural talent to be a great quarterback. And that's why I was just hoping he would get a coach like that. I was a Freddie Kitchens guy going into this year. And for that to turn out how it did was just so disappointing, because I'll never forget some of the film I watched on that 2018 Browns offense once Kitchens got a hold of the Browns offense. It's just, I'll never forget it. And I was so shocked to see how that played out this year.
I really like the Ron Rivera hire, but how are you going to not put a head of football operations in place before you hire a head coach? That's setting the team up for terrible, terrible things. It's just, you make the right decision and you do it in absolutely the wrong way. It's so Redskins.
I love the Rivera hire. 2-time coach of the year, former assistant coach of the year. Like, he's been to a Super Bowl. He's won a conference championship. I really do think Carolina fired the wrong guy. So I'm really excited. I just wish he wouldn't have went to such a clown organization like the Redskins. But I do think they hit it out of the park with their coaching hire. Well,
it's something like they must have. Hats off to the Redskins for selling it, because number one, selling the Redskins is hard enough to other head coaches, I would imagine. But doing so and him not even taking another interview anywhere was incredible. Like I mean, like he didn't even waste time. I mean, he likes something going on. Now maybe he was like, look, I'd rather not work with Bruce Allen. I don't know what it was, but there's something that he really liked about the Redskins where he didn't even want to give Cleveland or New York or possibly even Dallas a chance. It's pretty interesting. So I mean, hats off to the Redskins for that. They did something right when it comes to that. Other possible firings, we're still waiting on Jason Garrett. Adam Gase is probably safe, unfortunately. Anthony Lynn for the Chargers could be out as well. Doug Marrone is going to be returning to the Jaguars as well.
I am not a Doug Marrone guy. I cannot believe he saved his job with that performance in Week 17. We did call that, though. I mean, he came out there and coached like he didn't give a damn.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was a bunch of.
I did like his honesty. I liked his honesty in the press conference. He said, "Yeah, like I think about it. I'm worried about it. We're all worried about it. You know, you never stop thinking about it." And I can be honest with you. He essentially said he's probably going to get trashed later that night. So I appreciated the honesty.
I really do think that he got a vote of confidence from his players. I mean, I watched that game. I've watched it twice, and everybody played hard. Like that game meant something. And I mean, that's not really something you can, what's the word I'm looking for here? You can like see with your eyes. It's something you have to genuinely go into film and look for. But he never lost his team. He never lost the locker room. He lost Jalen Ramsey halfway through the season, but that's like, that's a personality thing. So I'm not a Marrone guy, but it was impressive that he never seemed to lose any of his players.
Yeah, and it seems to me, one thing I want to mention is the Dallas opening, because we're just waiting for Jason Garrett to get fired, and it's been 2 or 3 days now, and we're like, okay, it hasn't happened yet. So what's going on? What's interesting to me, I think if you're Dallas, you're probably going to fire Jason Garrett, but everybody's asking, why is it taking so long? They must be.
He doesn't have to be fired though.
He doesn't. His contract is up on like the 14th, I think, but. But everybody's like, well, why don't they just fire him? Why is it taking so long? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Either it's one of two things to me. Either they are allowing his contract to just run out so they can say they didn't fire him, or they already have their guy in place. So they're not panicking on running out of great head coaching candidates. Maybe they've already spoken with Urban Meyer under the table. Maybe they've already spoken with Jim Harbaugh. Maybe they've already spoken, with somebody like that would be interested in the job. That's one sort of, I guess, conspiracy theory almost that I have, that they're really not worried about it, because it's peculiar that you would be waiting so long and you're going to let Ron Rivera go out. You're going to let, Matt Rule probably get a job first after tonight's game against Georgia. You're going to let Mike McCarthy probably get hired. And what's going to be left? So to me, they have their sights set on one of these guys that is not one of the big names currently being mentioned, which is, Matt Rule, Mike McCarthy, Lincoln Riley, Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman is another one. I think Kevin Stefanski is probably going to get, if there's any jobs left over by the time Minnesota's out of the playoffs, he could get some looks as well. Joe Brady from LSU is another name to look out for, but Dallas doesn't seem to be in a hurry whatsoever. I think that's kind of an interesting thing people are looking over.
Question. I saw some rumors a few weeks ago that Jason Garrett was in contention for that Giants job if it opened. I mean, this was weeks back. Things have obviously changed, but what if this is also kind of an agreement between Jerry Jones and Jason Garrett that, hey, we're going to pretty much not say anything until your contract expires, force the Giants to go look elsewhere so that you're not like coaching across the sidelines twice a year against your family, because they treat each other like family in Dallas. So this could also be a way of not making Jason Garrett seem too loyal if he goes out and looks for other jobs, because other teams might be like, oh, well, he told the Cowboys he wouldn't sign with X team and X team. We don't want that in our locker rooms. This could also be a way of keeping him unblemished and trying to hide an asset from another team in their division. That's my conspiracy theory.
I'm ready to talk about quarterbacks.
Yeah, Mark's done with head coaches.
Well,
guys, we will get into.
I was going to say the problem with talking about head coaching is people are so satisfied with mediocrity in the NFL, and that's something I just cannot stand.
Well, yeah, I mean it's clear with Gase still being there, with Marone still being like. Why is Marone even?
If you can't call Adam Gase mediocre, that is way too kind.
Well, you're right. You're right. He's there's no bones. He's a terrible head coach. But the fact that you're people are so okay with mediocrity, like Mark said, that they've almost gotten to the point where they're okay with being terrible. Like I don't know what this Jets organization sees in Adam Gase. He's always been overrated. Even going back to, he wasn't that good of an offensive coordinator in Denver. Peyton Manning was the offensive coordinator. Let's be honest.
Correct.
One last thing I do want to mention before we get out of coaches. Chris, you mentioned what was the sales pitch for the Redskins to get Rivera. Name me one team that has a head coach opening that has as talented a defense on paper as the Redskins.
Their back end sucks.
But the front end is
so
great.
Good.
Yeah, so he's got a good defense to mold.
Yeah, I think the Giants' defense is something. I think it has a lot of good pieces in place to build around. But in totality, right now, I will give you that. But for me, I mean, if I'm a head coach, the first thing you look for is quarterback and offensive line. And the Giants have a much improved offensive line. They have in my opinion, a much better quarterback in Daniel Jones. You've got much better weapons in totality. I don't know what there is to not like about the Giants job. Personally, I think the Giants job is the most attractive job, on the market, even over Dallas.
The Cowboys are a better football team than the Giants.
They're a better football team.
Job is open. They're
a better football team.
Want.
But if you're a head coach, do you want to deal with Jerry Jones or do you want to deal with Dave Gettleman? I mean, the Giants are historically a very well-run organization.
I would much rather deal with Jerry Jones than David Gettleman.
Yeah, see, I can't be micromanaged like that. If I'm the head coach,
Gettleman is not even going to be your GM probably in 2 years. That dude ain't it. He wasn't it in Carolina.
Fine. So that means
in Giants.
Even better. That means I can have a say so in the GM.
I'm just saying. I mean, you have to deal with Jerry Jones, but you're getting Dak Prescott. You're getting a genuinely good defense. You're getting an all-world offensive line that is still signed for the future. The only issues that the Cowboys are going to run in with their personnel is they're probably not going to be able to retain both of Amari Cooper and Byron Jones. If they can retain either one of them, they might not be able to, and that's going to pose a big problem.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a hurdle they're going to have to overcome. Okay, guys, let's move on to quarterbacks. Obviously, 2019 year in review. So we want to take a look at some of the quarterbacks that surprised, some of the ones that were able to lift teams into playoff relevance and to championship relevance as well. That allowed you to hoist that championship trophy. I'm sure you guys have some of those as well. And then, of course, some quarterbacks that disappointed, and see how some of these guys project into 2020. So I don't know if there's any better quarterback for 2019 to start with than the guy that some people saw coming, others didn't see coming, but nobody
saw this coming.
Nobody saw this coming. That's right, Joe. Nobody saw this coming. Lamar Jackson at the quarterback position. There's not even close. The fantasy quarterback MVP of 2019. It was an unbelievable season. The guy, ironically, everybody was talking about when Lamar came out. He's not a great passer, not a great this, not a great that. Ironically enough, he leads the league in touchdown passes, and he only had 6 interceptions. It was an amazing, magical season for Lamar Jackson. Did you guys have Lamar Jackson on any of your teams? I didn't have any shares, but however, I will say this: I did draft a share to one of Mark's teams, so I can pat myself on the back for that.
You drafted that share.
He forced you to do it.
You drafted that share because I texted you and said, if you don't draft Lamar Jackson, you're fired. I had a lot of Lamar Jackson. I was going into draft season, and draft season for me started in May with best ball. Going into draft season, I was on Josh Allen a lot more than I was on Lamar Jackson. And then by early July, it kind of opened my eyes, and I was just like, Lamar Jackson's literally going to run for 1,100 yards, and everything he does as a passer is just going to be extra credit. And I did not see 36 touchdown passes coming. I did not see him leading the NFL in EPA per play or total QBR, but I knew this guy was going to be an elite fantasy commodity, and I thought he was a value all season long. And I did end up with a decent amount of Lamar Jackson, and I'm very happy about that.
Lamar Jackson was one of those players for me where I was pounding the table about him all off season. He's the best buy low candidate in Dynasty. He's got the rushing floor. He's so safe. And then I didn't even listen to it myself. I only had one share, and I was super disappointed all season.
Rip.
And sometimes it was tough. Like you're getting, you're looking at some of the quarterbacks that were like going around him. Like it was tough. I mean, do you go ahead and you get a guy like Deshaun Watson who you can count on, or do you take the chance really late with Lamar Jackson? And if he fails, then all of a sudden you got to go to the waiver wire and like start Sam Darnold the rest of the year or something, So, I mean, I get people sort of getting cold feet on him, on draft night, taking him that late and taking that risk. But like you said, the high floor was there, and we haven't seen a player like this since Vic. I mean, of course, his season eclipses anything that Vic ever did. But there's only one comparison, and that is Michael Vick. The question I have for you guys, though, is that because we want to project into 2020 and beyond. Surely this is not what we're going to expect from Lamar Jackson every year, right? Number one.
No, a touchdown regression is certainly coming.
Sure.
He's not throwing for 36 touchdowns on that few attempts again.
Lamar Jackson threw a touchdown pass on 9% of his attempts. A 9% touchdown percentage is not sustainable. Not even close.
No, and that's exactly why we were yelling and screaming about you shouldn't draft Deshaun Watson in the first round last year.
Or Patrick Mahomes this year.
100%.
Yeah, it's just not something that you're going to continue to do. But I think that's okay. I don't draft quarterbacks early. He's going to be a second, third round pick in a lot of leagues. There's no reason to take him that high. I've looked at my history all the way back through my entire fantasy history. I have a spreadsheet that has every single finish on it. And where I drafted quarterback is directly inversely correlated with championships. If I won a championship, I drafted the quarterback in the 9th round or later every single time.
I won a championship in 2009 drafting Drew Brees in the first round.
Well, we talk about this all the time. Yeah, you got lucky because we talk about this all the time. And it's something, Mark, that I mention on our show all the time is fantasy economics. Like there's no reason to take a quarterback in the first. Now, of course, we're talking the standard 1 QB league. We're not talking 2 QB or super flex because those you can obviously make a bigger argument for. But a standard 1 quarterback league, there's really no argument to be made to take a quarterback that high because if
unless everyone's carrying 3.
Unless everyone's carrying 3, and generally that's not going to be the case in a 1 quarterback league. So, if you are even thinking about taking quarterback that high, what does that generally mean? That generally means the prior season they went, bonkers. And what that generally means is that they're not going to go as bonkers the following year. So if you could guarantee that Lamar Jackson's going to do the same thing that he did this year in 2020, okay, maybe I'll listen a little bit. But you can't, and the likelihood of it happening is very, very slim. My question for you guys, though, not only can we not expect it to this level, can we expect even, I don't want to say even a fraction, I think maybe even a fraction, of course. Can we expect Lamar Jackson to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback? Can we expect him to be a top 10 real life quarterback moving forward? Because I'm going to be honest, there are a couple things that worry me here. Number one is there is the possibility, there's these rumors about Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator, leaving Baltimore. I think, look, hats off to Lamar Jackson being able to execute the game plan to essentially perfection this season, getting the Ravens offense where it needed to be and where Greg Roman wanted it to be that quickly right off the bat and sustaining it throughout the entire season. Hats off to him. However, I think the biggest the biggest credit for this is Greg Roman. It's Greg Roman's offense. I don't think you can put Lamar Jackson in any offense in the NFL and he just does all this willy-nilly. He built this offense around Lamar Jackson, and John Harbaugh listened, so credit to him as well. They built this offense around Lamar, but if Greg Roman leaves, that worries me as well. And even if he doesn't leave, there is a history of typically run-first quarterback. Because look, Lamar had a great passing season, but he is still a run-first quarterback for the most part. These run-first quarterbacks, the history is extremely bleak when it comes to defensive coordinators catching up to these sorts of players. So when Vic had his amazing season back in, 2001, 2002, nobody had ever seen it before, but they caught up in later years. He was still effective, but not to that degree. Same thing on round 2 with Vic when he got signed with the Eagles. Nobody really expected it to happen. So he had this amazing season in 2009. So 2010 comes around, and what happens? Everything sort of falls off a little bit. That, to me, I want to get you guys' opinion. That, to me, is what we could expect for Lamar.
I don't hate that take, but like if he doesn't take a whole lot of contact, so he's a guy that you can reasonably expect not to get hurt as much as an RG3, as much as a Michael Vick, because those guys were taking a ton of contact, as much as Cam Newton especially. But like if you look at his rushing floor, his floor is top 5 for the quarterback position. Like he's gonna be a top 5 quarterback if he's healthy, because he's an adequate passer. He's not bad anymore. Like watch his development even from week 1 when he blew up all the way to week 16, I guess. But he's getting better. He's still getting better every day. So I think there is a world where the passing numbers kind of start to take precedence over the rushing numbers.
Lamar Jackson was PFF's 5th highest graded passer this season. He averaged 7.8 yards per attempt. Like, we can say what we want about defensive coordinators catching up to these types of players, and I understand that. Historically speaking, Chris, you're right. Like, you are not wrong in any sense by suggesting that. I'm just saying that Lamar Jackson, the passer now, is not what Lamar Jackson, the passer, was at Louisville, or even as a rookie. He has made strides as a passer, like Joe just said, that are unprecedented. And losing Greg Roman, potentially losing Greg Roman, matters. It does. It matters a lot. That's the thing. I don't know how much it matters. I will end up not having any Lamar Jackson next year. I did not have any Patrick Mahomes this year. I'm just like you guys. I am not drafting a quarterback that high. It's not going to happen. But Lamar Jackson is like a good passer. He had a good season as a passer. So if teams keep him in the pocket, take running away from him and make him play quarterback, we saw this year that he can play quarterback. So I really don't know what to say here. We need a larger sample size from Lamar Jackson to be able to accurately project what we can expect for his career.
And if Marquise Brown stays healthy and you're going to try and spy Lamar Jackson and guard Marquise Brown on the outside one-on-one, good luck. You're going to get touchdowns over the top all day.
Don't forget
here's
Miles
a scenario.
Boykin's out there too, and he's a freak athlete.
Here's a real-life scenario. Greg Roman leaves. He gets hired in Cleveland, okay? Hypothetically. Todd Monken, who just got fired from the Browns, comes in, and he's the new offensive coordinator for the Ravens. Not just Todd Monken, but anybody like Todd Monken. Are we still, at least from a real-life perspective, are we really expecting Lamar Jackson to be that good of a passer, to continue being that good of a passer, and more of a Todd Monken offense?
No, I think they promote from within. I think that you have to keep the system in place that's been there.
I hope that John Harbaugh would be smart enough to do that if he's going to continue on with, obviously, of course he's going to continue on with the Lamar thing, but to me, at least from a real life perspective, here's where I'm finally at here with my Lamar take is, from a fantasy perspective, I think he's always going to be relevant. As long as he's healthy, I think he'll always be relevant, because you talked about his floor. He's a run-first quarterback. I don't think that's ever going to change, but he is doing a lot better of a job as a passing quarterback, which is good. But so I think his fantasy floor is always going to be pretty high. But from a real-life standpoint, can we see him being a franchise quarterback for the next 8 to 12 to 15 years? Like, is this something that we can realistically see from Lamar Jackson? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not sold on that portion of this. Fantasy wise, I'm sold. The reality point is kind of where I'm stuck at on Lamar Jackson.
I think I think saying that you're not sold on it and saying that you don't think it's going to happen are two completely different things. And if that's what you mean, if you mean that like you're not sold on it, you want to see more, then I agree with you, because I do think Lamar Jackson made strides as a passer, but at the same time, like, his range of outcomes is still massive. It's still very large, especially when he has potentially has a new offensive coordinator, assuming Greg Roman gets a new job. So that's kind of where I'm at. I almost just don't want to get into arguments about Lamar Jackson this offseason. He's going to be drafted super high in every league. He's going to probably be the 1.1 in super flex leagues, and his range of outcomes is still massive. So I don't know what else to say about this other than we need to see a larger sample size of Lamar Jackson.
I can get on board with that. I guess I'm more of the belief of, I don't feel good about it happening, but I do agree we need to see a larger sample size.
Are you selling him if you own him in Dynasty, Chris?
You know what? Maybe. Yeah, I think so. Depends on what I can get, because I'm looking. It's quarterback. I mean, if it's a one quarterback dynasty league, I don't need that. If I can get an upgrade at wide receiver or running back, and somebody's willing to give me an upper tier running back or an upper tier wide receiver and maybe a draft pick or two, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Not because I don't think that Lamar's going to be a fantasy bust in 2020 and beyond, just because I think that people are overvaluing him a little bit.
I want to hit you guys with a question that I kind of just thought of. I think it'll be fun. Murph, we haven't heard much from you, so I want to start with you. Who do you think right now is going to be your highest owned quarterback in 2020?
I feel like the hype's going to fall off Tannehill during the offseason, and I feel like I want to own a lot of him.
I love that take.
Yeah.
Boom.
Joe, what about you?
That's the same. That's the answer I was going to give too.
Tannehill.
Me and Joe always agree. I don't know if you guys realize that, but me and Joe agree quite a lot.
No, I got two guys jotted down here. Well, I've got 4 names jotted down here, but 2 of them stick out. Chris, how about you?
So who is going to be the highest owned quarterback for me in 2020?
Correct. Daniel Jones, right? It's Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no way in hell, guys, and I'm 3-1 here. I get it. There's no way in hell that Ryan Tannehill, who we've read the book on him. There's no way in hell Ryan Tannehill is going to be my highest owned quarterback. I get it. I'll own him. You could maybe own him in a couple leagues. I probably won't. I think there's going to be better options. But I can't have him as my highest owned quarterback when he's not the future of the franchise. Like, he looks good right now, and I don't know what's gotten into him. It's weird.
Dude, before he tore his ACL, he was projected to be a top 10 quarterback that season.
I don't know. We have a lot of film on Ryan Tannehill suggesting he can be good, and we also have a lot of film on Ryan Tannehill suggesting he can be a bottom 5 passer in the NFL.
Well, all that film's in Miami, so calm down.
We have a pretty good sample size that says Le'Veon Bell is a bad running back too.
You guys didn't let me
Adam
finish.
Gase.
Because we were talking about this before we started the podcast with Devontae Parker and with Le'Veon Bell, and just how breaking free from the diabolical clutches of Adam Gase can make players play up to their potential, and that's why I think Ryan Tannehill could probably be very good. Chris,
I do want to mention real quick, because Joe mentioned.
I want you to sell me on Daniel Jones.
I'll sell you right now on Daniel Jones. The offensive line is improving virtually every single game. Look at the weapons he's got, and they'll probably add some more weapons to that arsenal. And this is assuming everybody stays healthy, of course. You've got, in my opinion, who I believe is still the most overall talented running back in the NFL, in Saquon Barkley. Sterling Shepard is a high-quality number 2 wide receiver. Golden Tate has been nothing but ageless and reliable, and is still great in his yards after the catch. Darius Slayton, I personally believe, has the ceiling to be a number 1 wide receiver in the league, and at worst, a high-quality number 2. And then you've got, who can be, if he stays healthy, a top-flight elite tight end in this league. Again, like I mentioned, another the offensive line, it seemingly gets better every single week. So hats off to Gettleman and co for that. However, I do think the coach that you bring in matters, and luckily the defensive-minded guy the biggest defensive-minded guy is already off the board. So you've got guys like Urban Meyer left. You've got, which I don't think he's coming to the NFL, but you've got his name rolling around there. You've got Matt Rule. You've got Lincoln Riley. You've got Kevin Stefanski. You've got a bunch of other offensive coaches that may be in line for that job if they don't hire who I think they're going to hire is Matt Rule. But let's assume they hire Matt Rule. You bring that system to that offense with those weapons, with that quarterback and his running ability and his high floor, and we've obviously seen his high ceiling. Yeah, there's nothing to dislike about Daniel Jones. I mean, obviously, you need to fix the turnovers a little bit. But any rookie quarterback is going to have problems with the turnovers when in your rookie season, the offensive line isn't that great. So, again, granted, when they started, it wasn't that but they've gotten better. He's going to have to clean some turnovers up, increase make his decision-making a little bit better. But I think for the most part, Daniel Jones is a high-floor, high-ceiling quarterback, especially in a system like Matt Rule's.
I want to talk to you guys about one more name before we move on from this question, because it's really surprising where he finished in fantasy points per game. Matthew Stafford.
Oh my God. I didn't get to answer.
20.8 fantasy points per game.
I was going to say Matthew Stafford. Oh God. This is why on my podcast, on the RotoBros, my podcast, not Chris's, it's mine. Oh my God, this is so frustrating. I'm furious.
I have a second answer that might be interesting if you guys want to hear it.
I have a few.
I hope it's Mark's other guy.
If it is, I'm leaving.
Go for it, Murph.
My second answer, and follow me on this one, he'll have an entire offseason knowing he's the starter. His main wide receiver may not be injured most of the season. He's still got two pretty elite tight end options. We're talking about Jacoby Brissett.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Carson Wentz.
I mean, I'm not going to get on the Carson train right now, but Jacoby Brissett next year, I really have some interest in that. Again, whole offseason knowing he's the starter. He can prep. He's not given the job, 2 weeks before the preseason starts? During the preseason? I think they announced it during a preseason game. T.Y. Hilton was injured a lot this year. You got Paris Campbell going into his second year. You've got all these weapons on the offense. Marlon Mack has not been bad. The offensive line is still really, really good. There's no reason not to take him late in drafts next year.
I'd go back to Jacoby Brissett.
I won't blame you for that. It's a huge question mark for me because I hear this coach speak. Jacoby's going to be the starter. The plan is for him to be the starter. You hear the Bears saying the same thing about Trubisky. It's coach speak to me because I don't trust it. If Eason falls for whatever reason, if a guy like Jacob Eason falls in the third round and he's sitting there for Indianapolis or Chicago, I mean, do I really believe that they wouldn't take a chance on a guy like that with he's a little consistent, little bit of a project, has a huge arm, the biggest arm by far in this entire draft class. Why would they not take this guy? They can't believe that Jacoby Brissett is the franchise quarterback. Perhaps he could be. I think he, to me, is another Tannehill sort. He's a high quality backup quarterback. But real quick, before we move on, I have a second name. And I can't believe this. Kyler Murray.
I think Kyler Murray's still going to go in the first 5 rounds in most drafts.
You think Kyler Murray is going to go within the first 5 rounds?
Yeah, because people are looking at him. He's going to improve as a passer.
Yeah,
he was already a top 10 quarterback. He's a guy that is going to be looked at similarly to people are looking at a Lamar Jackson ceiling with him. They're going to buy into the hype.
He's got QB1 ceiling. There's no question about it.
I think he does.
But I'm not drafting him in the 5th round. I'll take him in the 7th or 8th round.
Oh, yeah. It all depends on where he goes. But if he's got a reasonable price, he's another guy that could be my second or even first highest owned quarterback in 2020. They need an alpha wide receiver. I have accepted the fact. You guys know Christian Kirk was my favorite wide receiver coming out of that class. And I think he's going to be exponential for this offense for years ago. I think he's fantastic. However, I think that Christian Kirk is more of a quality number 2, and I think that they need an alpha wide receiver. Now, I understand they still have Akeem Butler, who ran a faster 40 than what a lot of people thought he would. He's a possibility as that alpha number 1 guy. They may go out and get him this year. They need an alpha number 1 receiver on the outside for Kyler Murray. That's what they need really more than anything on that offense. But yeah, Kyler Murray is another name that I think has a really high floor. And a guy that I won't even think twice before I click draft on him.
I honestly think going into best ball season, and I'm probably going to start a bit earlier than I did last year. My primary targets, really depending on ADP, are going to be Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford, Daniel Jones, and probably Kyler Murray. And I will go back to Carson Wentz and Baker Mayfield, assuming the price is right.
It will be. It's going to be super low for those guys.
Yeah, particularly Carson Wentz, I'm more comfortable going back to, but I still think Baker is it. I still think he's got elite arm talent, and I'm sorry, 2018 was not an aberration. I mean, we know what this kid is capable of, and that's why I'm okay going back with him. I still think a 35 plus touchdown season and 4,500 yards is well within his range of outcomes year to year. So he's another guy I will be going back to. Kirk Cousins as well, I think, is interesting.
Another great segue, Mark. You're on a roll tonight with these segues. Baker Mayfield. Okay. Where do we begin? Mark, you and I both had him as a top 12 quarterback this year. He was my QB 12. I've never been a huge Baker fan, but I couldn't ignore what was going on here. I never liked the Freddie Kitchens hire, but I was like, I think they could probably overcome this with Odell and Jarvis and Njoku and Kareem and Nick. And it's like, how could you not overcome Freddie Kitchens? Obviously, that didn't happen. We mentioned Todd Monken as well. He wasn't calling the plays, but regardless, he was still a member of that offense. So you're looking at it and you're like, there's only one blemish here, which is Freddie Kitchens. However, they couldn't overcome him. With Baker, he was one of the biggest arguably the biggest disappointment. Like, I did my awards at my fantasy awards for FSA, in FSA the other day, and my three biggest disappointments in order were David Johnson, OJ Howard, Baker Mayfield. And I think those were probably the three biggest disappointments that I could think of. I think you could argue Juju, but Baker's up there. And for me, I don't see what you're seeing, Mark. I don't see this elite arm talent. I see average arm talent. I don't think he's some special football player. Quite frankly, I don't think he's that good at football. He has not cleaned up his mistakes. He arguably there's no argument about it. He got worse from his rookie season, and it's hard. It's got to be very difficult to get worse from a fantasy and real life perspective when you are surrounded with the weapons that he had on that offense. And I get it. A lot of it has to do with Freddie Kitchens, but there are a lot of things that he regressed sharply in 2019 that Freddie Kitchens doesn't have any control over. He just wasn't very good this year. And I made the comparison to that I think Baker Mayfield is essentially Gardner Minshew that was drafted first overall.
That's a terrible take.
It's a terrible
He's got so much more arm talent than Gardner
terrible
Minshew.
comp.
He could have
it's
all
not
the
even a discussion between those
this
two
is such
in
a
terms
bad
of
comp.
arm talent.
Baker Mayfield.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Why
Baker
is it
Mayfield
not a
has a
discussion?
97th
Gardner
percentile
Minshew,
throw velocity, a 98th percentile college QBR,
Mark, I don't care.
a 98th
I don't
percentile
care.
college yards per attempt. He
Mark,
broke
I
the
don't care.
touchdown pass record as a rookie. That is
don't
not
care.
a good comp. Find
I
another
don't
one.
care. It doesn't matter to me. Gardner Minshew
Like, you're not watching
outplayed.
film if you think that Baker
They're not the
Mayfield and
same
Gardner
player.
Minshew are similar.
Here's a
in
yes
terms
or
of
no
arm
question. Did Gardner Minshew outplay Baker Mayfield with a worse head coach, a worse offense, worse weapons, worse everything? Did
Baker
he?
had a worse coach
He
by
did.
far.
Gardner
Baker
Minshew
had a worse coach by far.
It's arguable. I think it's
Not arguable. Freddie Kitchens
even
was
close.
awful. He was one of the worst. That was one of the worst head coaching performances I have ever seen. Like,
Okay,
that's how bad
let's just say
Freddie
this
Kitchens
then. What if I'll even give you the head coach? Worse offense, worse weapons around him, and he was a 6th round pick, and he still outplayed the number 1 overall pick.
Of course he did. I don't disagree with that.
I don't understand how Gardner Minshew is that much worse than Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield can do a lot of things that Gardner Minshew is never going to be able to do because Gardner Minshew is not a talented passer.
Like what? Throw for more interceptions?
No, like actually throw the football more than 40 yards, throw the football into tight windows, make money throws. Baker Mayfield was making PFF money throws at a historic rate as a rookie. This is stuff that happened. We know he's capable of doing it.
We've seen Gardner Minshew make some great throws as well. Now, I get it.
Come on.
you
Gardner
haven't.
Minshew barely throws the ball downfield at all.
The dude throws the football like 2015 Peyton Manning. He does not have arm talent. Baker Mayfield has like elite arm talent. We saw it as a rookie.
He's not elite arm talent. That's asinine. He's not elite arm talent.
Care
Pat
if you
Mahomes
don't say
has
it's
elite arm talent.
But even if you're saying it's average arm talent, that's better than Gardner Minshew.
Okay, but arm talent doesn't make the comparison. There are other ways that these guys compare to one another than just arm talent. I will give you that Baker's arm talent is better than Minshew's. I don't think it's by some massive, overreach like you guys do, but I think that for the most part, they are essentially the same football player, and Baker has a slightly better arm. Like I don't see anything.
That take's going to go really sour.
I don't see anything that tells me that Baker Mayfield is, and forget the Gardner Minshew take for. I don't see anything that tells me that Baker Mayfield is a franchise quarterback.
Man, I should have brought popcorn to this show.
I wanna move on because this just isn't even close. Baker and Gardner are not comparable in almost any way, shape, or form. Baker's just a better athlete. Baker is not an elite athlete, and he's a
not
better
a great
athlete than
athlete.
Gardner Minshew.
They're both terrible athletes. They're both horrible. Baker Mayfield is not athletic at all.
Unfortunately, Baker Mayfield is not a terrible athlete like what you're suggesting. He's a decent athlete. He's not a running quarterback, but like this is why I want to move on. I mean, this isn't even close.
But take away, forget the Gardner Minshew comparison for a minute. What shows you that Baker Mayfield is a franchise? He doesn't, the same question marks, okay? The same question marks that I had, that I was called a clown for 2 years ago for calling, the same critiques that I was called a clown for 3 years ago on Baker Mayfield still apply now. That's a problem, especially in a season that you regress. Do we see in 2020, do you guys see in 2020 Baker Mayfield improving? And do you think the regression was only because of Freddie Kitchens?
I don't think it was only because of Freddie Kitchens. Like, Baker Mayfield didn't play all that well this year. But I can't, like, he's good. He's a good football player. He needs to improve in his decision making. He needs to get better chemistry with his wide receivers. But he has a ceiling. Like, Gardner Minshew doesn't have a ceiling. Gardner Minshew is Alex Smith.
I feel better about
Get
that.
Get him Tyreek Hill, and maybe he can survive in the NFL.
I feel better about that comparison. I'll be going back to Baker Mayfield again because I think he's an extremely talented passer. He's going to have weapons again. Hopefully they all stay off of IR. Hopefully they avoid playing through sports hernias the entire season. And I'm not making excuses. I agree with Joe. Baker played a lot of bad football this year. I do think he got pretty unlucky with some turnover variance, but at the same time, I still saw a ton of flashes of what I know this kid is capable of. And I'm sorry, I don't believe his rookie year was an aberration. He did some things his rookie year that I'm never going to forget.
Gardner Minshew threw 14 games. He played 2 less games than Baker. Significantly, he had 6 interceptions. Baker Mayfield 21. He had a higher completion percentage than Baker Mayfield did. I mean, he threw for less yards. I get that. They were right around the same in yards per attempt. I just don't think it's off base that these guys are both in the same tier of quarterback, which is quality backup level quarterback. I think that's what they are.
I think Gardner Minshew was better this year. I mean, Baker had a really, really bad year, but I'm just saying, I still saw plenty of flashes of what I know Baker Mayfield can be. I mean, this is one of the greatest college football quarterbacks of all time, one of the greatest college passers, pure passers of all time.
So was Sam Bradford, though.
He's got one of the, I understand.
Sam Bradford was actually okay in the NFL, too.
Sam Bradford.
He was a high quality backup.
Sam Bradford couldn't stay healthy. Like, I'm not comparing Sam Bradford to Baker Mayfield because Baker Mayfield doesn't have the injury.
Even when Sam Bradford was healthy, he's a high quality backup level quarterback. I think that's about where Baker is.
I feel like the line that you're drawing for high quality backup level quarterback is like the top 15 quarterbacks are the only starters in the NFL. If you're saying that,
are you saying Baker Mayfield's a top 15 quarterback in the NFL?
No, but he's right outside.
I think he's gonna be right now. There's if I'm building a franchise today, there's just not that many quarterbacks I'm choosing over Baker Mayfield. Like, as far as choosing quarterbacks, are you choosing Jared Goff or Baker Mayfield?
Jared Goff.
Oh, God.
Are you kidding me?
I'm taking Jared Goff every
joking?
day.
You're taking a guy who literally has to wait.
Put Baker Mayfield in a Sean McVay offense, and he will throw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns.
We're talking about a quarterback that has to sit
39 interceptions.
And have his head coach read his defense for him. We have watched film on Jared Goff's coach reading defenses for him because Jared Goff cannot do it himself. He's reading defenses at a 3rd grade level. At least Baker Mayfield can diaggnose a secondary.
The last 2 seasons,
who's been Jared Goff over Baker Mayfield? Not a chance.
The last 2 seasons, who's been a better quarterback?
That's fine. He's more experienced. He was drafted in 2016. Baker was drafted in 2018.
The last 2 seasons was my question.
Okay, so Baker's rookie and sophomore year versus Jared Goff's breakout years, that's not fair. That is not a fair comparison at all.
Okay,
look at Jared Goff's rookie and sophomore years and then try and make that comparison.
Baker literally broke the rookie touchdown pass record, and you're taking Jared Goff. Like, I can't. No, that's.
I don't care about a rookie touchdown passing record, Mark. I don't. That means literally nothing.
That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything regarding a quarterback's ceiling of what a quarterback can be.
No, I have no. That is a stat. Completely. That is a worthless stat to me.
Disagree with you completely. Stat.
Okay, so obviously we don't see eye to eye on Baker Mayfield, even though he's arguably the fourth best quarterback in that division. And from a real life standpoint,
who on the Steelers is better, not counting Ben Roethlisberger? Like, even right now, Ben Roethlisberger.
It's Ben Roethlisberger. That's what I'm counting.
You would take Ben Roethlisberger in 2020 over Baker Mayfield, coming off of elbow surgery?
100%. Yes.
Yeah, not a chance.
I'm taking the Hall of Fame quarterback, even at that age. Yes. Over Baker Mayfield.
Not a chance for me.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some quarterbacks that for 2020 that are could be a little bit of a hit or miss. I'm sure you guys have some names as well. Josh Allen. What do you guys think about Josh Allen? Because obviously he comes from quarterback 21 in fantasy, rises all the way to QB 6. What's the take on Josh Allen? Going into 2020, is this something you're buying, especially in Dynasty, or do you think he can keep it up? Obviously, he's got a high floor, right?
Yeah, I'm stock up on Josh Allen. I think he's improving as a passer. I don't know if he'll ever get there where he can be a pure passer in the NFL, but his rushing floor is fine. He's done enough to be the guy for that franchise, at least through his 5th-year option, probably longer. I think Josh Allen is a solid buy in Dynasty. I don't know if I want to buy him at the QB6 price. Even if it's higher than that, I don't want that. But, if you can get a value on Josh Allen, I would absolutely buy him in Dynasty.
Let's kick it back to Murph real quick. Murph, what do you think about Josh Allen? I've talked about Josh Allen, a couple times here. We haven't really, dived into him that much. What do you think of Josh Allen for 2020? Is he a guy that you're going to own in 2020, or are you going to kind of sell a little bit?
I think it really depends on what Joe just said. Like, it depends on the price. I would like to own a lot of him. I think they're going to make improvements to the offense over the offseason. You got Devin Singletary coming into his second year, looking pretty good in the first year, kind of helping take some pressure off Josh Allen. I think he's got a solid floor. And if I'm drafting, I want a guy that has a pretty solid floor. And the upside's definitely there. Like Joe said, the rushing upside is great. So just, I like him. I'll own a lot of him if he's not a high commodity.
If he's a 7th-round pick in redraft, are you taking him?
Absolutely.
Yeah, me too.
All day long.
Probably, especially if they draft a guy like Jerry Jeudy. Mark, what about you and I have talked about a lot about Josh Allen. We both love Josh Allen coming in the year. He was our playoff hero quarterback last year. Ended up being QB1 toward the end of last season. So what's your take on Josh Allen? Is he a guy that you're going to buy or sell in 2020?
Quick interruption. Mark made that call on the Fantasy Takeaway podcast.
That's true. He did.
Is Josh Allen's ceiling not what Lamar Jackson did this year?
No, it's the same.
It's the same thing. I mean, he's not a very good. Like, Josh Allen's ceiling is 2015 Cam Newton. If he can have a ceiling where he cleans up his passing efficiency just a little bit, average more yards per attempt, increase that touchdown percentage a little bit, his ceiling is literally 40 total touchdowns and like 4,500 total yards. Yeah, I'm absolutely buying Josh Allen. I don't think I want him in the 7th round. But if I can get him near the 9th or 10th, yes, I will own a lot of Josh Allen.
He improved his completion percentage by 6 points. Like, if he improves it again by 4 or 5 in this coming season and his touchdown percentage goes up, like you said, like, he's solid. He's one of those players who could win you your league at the quarterback position. Yeah,
Cole Beasley is such a gift for him. Like, because that's what a guy like Josh Allen that doesn't have a lot of great downfield accuracy. Having that reliable underneath target like Cole Beasley is such a huge commodity for him. And not only that, but you saw the emergence of Dawson Knox, a guy that I loved coming out as a tight end. I think he was my number 2 dynasty tight end this year. I love Dawson Knox, and he was huge. Obviously, John Brown, but I don't think John Brown is sort of that number 1 alpha wide receiver that he needs. I think John Brown should be more of the number 2 guy in that offense. If they can get a guy like Jerry Jeudy, or they can get a guy, some sort of alpha number 1 outside wide receiver, that to me is going to be a huge. Guys like Josh Allen, who aren't great passers, I think generally need, especially when they're throwing on the run, I think they need a guy with a strong wide receiver with a large catch radius, to be ready for some of those errant passes. We saw the Panthers do that. They went out and got Devin Funchess and Kelvin Benjamin because of that reason for Cam Newton, because Cam Newton's not always that accurate. So we've seen him have some errant throws. So having those guys that can go up and get the football in any which direction, I think would be huge for Josh Allen. I'm not, from a reality standpoint, I'm not really sold that he's going to be like a franchise quarterback for the next 12 to 15 years. But from a fantasy standpoint, yeah, I mean, you could do a lot worse than Josh Allen.
I think his range of outcomes are about as wide as Lamar Jackson's and Kyler Murray's. Where are you guys drafting Jimmy Garoppolo? Anybody going
12th
back?
round?
Anybody going back to Jimmy Garoppolo?
I would take him at the end of the draft. He's an average quarterback with elite coaching, and I'll take that.
Yeah, and he's going to be efficient, I think.
8.4 yards per attempt, was third in the NFL this year through 27 touchdown passes. He was up there in touchdown percentage. Interception percentage could have been better, but I thought he had some pretty bad turnover variance, and I'm not going to knock a fantasy quarterback for interceptions. So
yeah, I mean, he outscored in this run heavy offense. Like, he outscored guys that we would have sworn would outscore him. He outscored Kirk Cousins. He outscored Phillip Rivers. He outscored Baker Mayfield. The guy outscored Drew Brees. I know Drew Brees only played 11 games, but I mean, he outscored those guys. And so, I mean, I think if you have not, if you're toward the end of the draft, you haven't taken a quarterback, I think you can obviously do a lot worse, than Jimmy Garoppolo. But I think from a fantasy standpoint, I think I would still probably roll the dice on maybe a Kirk Cousins next year. Maybe that's about it, because I'm looking at guys. I don't know if I would take Jared Goff over him from a fantasy standpoint next year. I don't think I would. Matthew Stafford, I think, comes back. I would take him over Jimmy Garoppolo, of course. I think the ceiling's higher there. But
agree.
Jimmy has been a really solid quarterback. I think Shanahan found his guy.
No, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be a franchise quarterback. I don't think he's elite. I don't think he's ever going to be elite, but there are things he's very good at. And I think Shanahan has found what he is good at, has molded a system around what he is good at. And I think it's that simple. He's a guy that I'm probably going to have a decent amount of exposure to again. I had a lot of him this year, and a lot of that exposure was 15th, 16th round exposure. So it was very cheap. He
fits that basic West Coast scheme really, really well too. Like, he's not a good downfield passer. His mechanics are awful, but in terms of like quick release, there really isn't much better.
Yeah. Like, this is a low to median ADOT system that is being built around him with high percentage passes. And that's something he thrives in. He isn't sacked that often because of how quickly he can get the ball out and how quick he can make reads. He's not a one read quarterback. And that's something I really like about him.
Okay, so one quarterback that I want to touch on as well. Of course, if you guys have any names you want to throw in there as well, let's kind of knock those out before we get to tight ends. But one guy I think that really needs to be mentioned is, and we may not know how to project him in 2020 because he may not be a starter, but Jameis Winston was a top 5 fantasy quarterback, hit the 30-30 club, 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. He hit that plateau there. He threw for 5. He led the league in passing yards. He was awesome from a fantasy standpoint, but man, from a reality standpoint, it's time to go, isn't it? Like, what are we making of Jameis Winston?
He's the starter for the Bucs next year.
I would assume he's the starter
all
for
season,
the Bucs
because I
year.
personally think they're going to draft somebody. I think they're going to draft somebody, and he may start week 1, but I don't know if by week 12 he's the guy.
If they bring somebody in to compete with him, then I'm not drafting him.
Yeah, absolutely not. Well, I mean, you can draft him as long as it's late.
Yeah.
Because quarterback is replaceable and his ceiling is obviously very, very high.
Yeah, it's got to be a fair price. It can't be like the QB5 price. He's going to have to come at a discount if they bring in somebody to compete with him. You know who I think my biggest question mark is going into 2020 relative to what his ADP is probably going to be like and what we can expect as a fantasy ceiling? What the hell are we going to do with Aaron Rodgers?
Oh,
dude, I don't know.
Staying
Because
away.
if he's a 7th round pick, I'm going to draft him all the time.
If he's a 7th round, you'll take Aaron Rodgers in the 7th round?
I won't.
Sure.
I don't think I'd have taken Aaron Rodgers in the 7th round this year, honestly.
I wouldn't either. Like, yeah, of course it all depends on his price, but like, if we're just talking about like straight, do you want any shares in 20? I don't want any shares. Like, I've got him in a dynasty league, and
he's a matchup based play now.
Yeah,
he is.
He'll need to be a double-digit rounds guy. I'll need to be able to get him in the 10th round, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah, he'll be one of my lowest owned. I have one share of him, and it's a dynasty league. I am fully planning on getting rid of Aaron Rodgers this year, not just because it's dynasty, because I don't want him anymore. He's not reliable as he once was, and that's crazy to say for QB9 on the year. But I mean, I would rather trade him and maybe a pick for like Kyler Murray or something, or somebody like that. Like, I have no use for him.
Around the table once again, I'm going to go to all three of you with a question. assuming they cannot retain Amari Cooper, but they do retain Kellen Moore, are you drafting Dak Prescott in 2020? Murph, go.
I don't think so. It's tough. Maybe if the price is right, but it'll have to be really far back in the draft. There are guys I like better. Not to say I don't like Dak, but just without Amari, it scares the shit out of me.
I'll draft him, but I'm worried about the price tag because a lot of the time when you see these guys that were way undervalued the previous year, they end up on a ton of championship rosters and guys fall in love. So if he's like a 4th or 5th, maybe even 6th round pick, I'm not interested. Really, I don't draft quarterback before like the 9th round in 95% of my leagues. So when I'm talking about drafting a quarterback in the 7th round, I probably actually am not going to do that. I'm just thinking it's a good value.
Chris?
He went as QB 18 this year. Assuming let's assume that he loses Amari Cooper. He's obviously not going to go as a top 5 quarterback like he finished this year. So my answer is absolutely going to be no. And even if, let's say, he drops back down to that range of like 15 to 20 where he was drafted this year as far as ADP among quarterbacks, you're probably going to have guys like Kirk Cousins there. Josh Allen was QB 21. I would rather have Josh Allen. I would, to be honest with you, I might, and I just said I wouldn't have any shares. I might rather have Aaron Rodgers than Dak Prescott if he loses Amari Cooper.
With Amari Cooper,
not if they have Kellen Moore. If they have Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator, I'm taking Dak Prescott over Aaron Rodgers just because they throw the football more.
Okay, Ben Roethlisberger. What about Ben Roethlisberger, you guys? Are each of you taking him over Dak, number one? And question number two, are each of you going to have any shares of him next year whatsoever?
No, I mean, I don't. I had a lot of Ben Roethlisberger going into the season in best ball, and they were juju stacks, and I got absolutely roasted on those. With Amari Cooper on the field, Dak Prescott averaged 8.5 yards per attempt and a 4.9 touchdown percentage. With Cooper off, 7.48 yards per attempt and a 3.6 touchdown rate. Like, Cooper mattered to this offense a lot, and if they can't retain him, how bad is that going to make the Ezekiel Elliott contract going to look?
This is an offensive league now. You prioritize Amari Cooper over Byron Jones every single time. If it comes down to those two,
they only have $18 million in cap space. Like, how are they possibly going to sign Amari Cooper?
I don't know if they're going to be able to retain
Amari. And Mark, you know where I'm going with this. What does it go back to?
Let's save that for the running backs episode.
Okay.
Agreed.
Because we definitely got to get to that. All right, guys, real quick, let's get to some tight ends as well. Tight ends, there were obviously some headliners at tight end this year. A lot of things happened that we guys that broke out that we really didn't see. Some we did see, but for 2020, we also want to project forward as well. Murph, there are a lot of guys here that we didn't see some breakouts here. Not a lot of people saw Darren Waller's breakout. Some people, enjoyed thought Austin Hooper might kind of fall off after his, what they would call a flukish tight end one finish last year. He didn't. Mark Andrews came out of nowhere. Are any of these guys, will you own them in 2020? Do you believe that any of them will repeat that in 2020?
I think I'd own Mark Andrews and Darren Waller, depending on the price. I draft tight end very late. I don't believe in it as a position. This year was definitely a great year for tight ends. So, hats off to the position, but it really just depends on how hyped they get. I think those guys are going to be really overhyped. Honestly, I feel like people like Zach Ertz might be a better deal next year just because there's so many names they're going to be bandied about. I don't know. It really depends. Jared Cook might still be an option for me because he'll go really late in drafts and he had a pretty solid year. It really just depends. Price means everything for me in fantasy. So
hot take. Zach Ertz gets traded. Dallas Goedert is all of a sudden in the conversation as a top 3 tight end.
Well, he should be.
I would draft him as a top 4 tight end.
Absolutely. He's the best tight. He's the most talented overall tight end on that roster. Dallas Goedert, and I've said that from day one, that Dallas Goedert is an animal. And I love Zach Ertz. So
you're saying Goddard is better than Zach Ertz?
Yes. I think he's a better football player than Zach Ertz. 100%.
He is a better football player.
But that doesn't mean that Zach Ertz isn't bad. Zach Ertz is still a top 5 tight end in the league, in my opinion. But I think Dallas Goedert is top 4. I think he's phenomenal. He's got to be either 2 or 3 because we agree that Kittle is number 1.
I think tight end discussions have to start with Tyler Higbee. What the hell do we do here?
Sell.
Dude, I don't know. I really, honestly, if I own him in Dynasty, I'm selling, and I don't want a piece of it next year because what if Gerald Everett comes back, Because look, Gerald Everett broke out in almost the same way that Tyler Higbee did and then got hurt.
Yeah.
So, like, what if these guys just completely cannibalize one another's value? Because there's still wide receivers on that team. They still don't have the offensive line figured out, and their quarterback downright sucks.
And that's right. That's what they've been doing since Higbee and Everett were there. I saw he threw the golf sucks there and there. But that's what they've been doing since they were drafted. They've been cannibalizing each other. And Tyler Higbee was he's an amazing talent. Like, he's a great talent. He was a great talent coming out of Kentucky. He just had some off-season thing or some off the field issues to deal with, and that's why he dropped in the draft and all that kind of stuff. But and of course Everett was taken a lot higher than him in the draft. So draft capital, they've allowed Everett to sort of have the first reins at being that guy. But I think you're right. I think they're still going to cannibalize, each other, and I don't want him. Why would you take Tyler Higbee when you can have a guy, at the same sort of price range at what he might go, even if he is a starter in St. Louis? Why would you rather have him over Darren Waller or Mark Andrews or somebody like that? I think I would
think he's going to go that high.
I'd rather have Hunter Henry too.
Yes, 100%.
Love Hunter Henry in 2020. You know who else? Two guys that I think I'm going to own like a ton of in 2020, Mike Gesicki and Noah Fant.
Oh,
that's funny. That's who I was going to say. If you would have paused longer, I would have told you who you were going to say.
Yep.
Noah Fant, I completely agree with.
Oh, wait, that's wrong, Chris. Just by the way, I looked it up. It's Fant.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we had this discussion. The other day.
Great show, guys, but
I'm in a bad habit of saying Noah Fant, and it is Noah Fant. But yeah, Fant is another one that I'm going to have a lot of shares on. And look, I'm going to go right back to him because I think the talent is going to be too much. Matthew Stafford coming back is going to be too much to ignore. I'm going right back to TJ Hawkinson very late. Not in every league, but very late. And in my dynasty leagues, it's a hard hold because I think the talent is just through the roof. It's unfortunate he got hurt. Maybe we could have seen some sort of late season surge. But yeah, he's a guy that I'll come right back to. I think Hooper is going to be fine. Like, he's an impending free agent, so there's a chance he can move on, but I think the Falcons want to re-sign him. Murph mentioned, it's a really good year for tight ends.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun for tight ends. If you could give me your number one dynasty buy at the position and like think relative to like price, what you would be willing to offer, somebody that could be like easily acquired, but could also be like a league winner in 2020 at the tight end position, who do you think?
Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, I think that's mine too.
You guys don't think Dallas Goedert's price is going to be pretty high? He was 10th at the position. He was 10th at the position this year.
High, but you could probably get him for a wide receiver 3.
Yeah, it's going to be relative.
Position this year in receiving yards. Like, he actually finished pretty well despite losing 128 targets to Zach Ertz. And like, we know this dude's a tight end 1 when Zach Ertz isn't on the field. I agree with you because I 100%.
You want somebody free?
Out. Yeah, I'm almost looking for like free, but could still be a league winner because I do have somebody in mind.
Jonnu Smith?
Jonnu Smith. That was it.
Yep. I like Jonnu Smith. I think he's a talented football player.
I think Jonnu Smith is a freak athlete.
I'm going to give you guys a freebie right here. Everybody talks about who are your dark horses, who are these guys that you could just get for free, and you don't even have to worry about drafting the position. You just, after the draft, you can go pick them up. A lot of it, obviously, well, most of it, if not all of it, obviously depends on what happens with Jason Witten. But I mean, this is digging deep because we don't know if Witten's going to be back for 2020. I love Blake Jarwin. Blake Jarwin I have a fantasy crush on Blake Jarwin. And of course, this is not, if Jason Witten comes back, you can't draft Blake Jarwin. But I think Blake Jarwin is a guy that a lot of people are going to forget about. But I think you need to keep his name in your back pocket because you need to really be paying attention if Jason retires, because Blake Jarwin is a guy that I think is going to be a hard breakout if Jason's no longer a Cowboy in 2020.
I'm a Jarwin guy as well. Jarwin is a guy I definitely want to buy a lot of, but I honestly think going through winter and into the spring, my most sought after tight end is going to be Jonnu Smith.
I wouldn't mind buying Dawson Knox either. Like, I think his snap share increases. I think his target share increases. He's a pretty good football player, and I think that offense is continuing to get better.
I got asked the other day, what are we doing with Jacob Hollister and Will Dissly? And for me, I'm actually more of a Hollister fan, but for whatever reason, Dissly was more productive, especially in the red zone. Are you guys, any of you three, are you guys buying these guys? I'm not buying either one of them for 2020, I don't think. But what say you guys? Are these targets for you at all?
Those are not.
It's
guys
worse Gerald Everett, Tyler Higbee for me.
Those are not two guys I'll be pursuing.
Murph?
I think I'm agreeing with the other ones on this one.
Yeah. Okay. So we're all 4 out on both of those guys. So that's I think it's a pretty damning sentiment there. Are there any tight ends that you guys think could be, maybe this kind of goes hand in hand with, the guys that, we talked about as guys that we'll target late and, with some high ownership and buy lows on. Are there any guys that you think could just break out a la Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, Dallas Goedert in 2020?
I got one in mind.
That we haven't already named.
How about TJ Hawkinson?
100%.
Bueller.
I'd really like to say Irv Smith because I liked a lot of the things that he did, but it doesn't seem like they've got any interest in moving on from Kyle Rudolph.
No, he's still going to be cannibalized. Otherwise, I agree because I think Irv Smith is a far superior pass catcher to Kyle Rudolph. And Kyle Rudolph is not like a bad receiver. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying I think Irv Smith has what it takes to be like an elite tight end in this game.
All right, last name that I have, guys. Obviously, one of the biggest disappointments of the year, not just tight end, but of the entire season at any position. Are any of you guys going back after OJ Howard after this year?
If he's still on the same team, probably not.
Yeah, we've seen it now. Arians doesn't want to use the tight end as a pass catcher. And OJ Howard actually didn't play very well this year.
No, he did not.
He was a freak last year, but he did not show the same things on film that we were used to seeing from him.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what did they do differently with Heath Miller that made him so effective and fantasy relevant and relevant in real life? He was one of the best tight ends in the league for years. And one of the most utilized tight ends as well for years, and it makes you wonder. We always said going into when going into Arians' coaching stint here, he's never had a tight end with the talent and the ceiling of OJ Howard, and I loved OJ Howard coming. I think he's fantastic. I think he's got a Gronk ceiling, but with Arians, it always worried me. It's just weird to me. I can't really put my finger on why they don't seem to target him. I don't know if it's Jameis. I don't know if it's Bruce. I don't know if it's both.
I'm going to bump one of your takes real quick, Chris. The tight end learning curve never existed for TJ Hawkinson. #top 10.
Oh,
yeah.
No.
Yeah.
You're going to bury my dude live on the podcast like that?
Hey, I think I
disagreed the whole time. I love TJ Hawkinson. I think he's one of the best prospects to come out at the position ever. But you just don't succeed in year one at tight end. It's super rare.
It is. I concede that. And I knew that going in. When I said that in FSA, I knew that. I knew the history of rookie tight ends. But I was I agreed with you. This is the best rookie tight end prospect that we have seen in literal decades. He's a better tight end prospect coming out than Rob Gronkowski was. And I just thought, okay, on a team where, you've got Marvin Jones, you got Kenny Galladay. I just think Stafford they're going to be a run heavy team. They're going to want to have some quick hitting passes. And I think that TJ Hawkinson was going to be that guy. It just didn't work for him. Now, granted, he did get hurt, so we don't know what could have happened toward the end of the year. Maybe they targeted him more we don't know. So that's unfortunate. But from the time he was playing, he had that one blow up game in week 1, and that was it.
I didn't expect the Lions to chuck as much as they did with Matthew Stafford at the helm. I did not see that coming.
No.
I got one more name for you, and then I'm pretty much out of tight end names. Not assuming, but let's just say hypothetically Greg Olsen either retires or is gone. Do you guys like Ian Thomas?
Yes, I do, because he's absolutely free. I don't think, he's kind of slow. He's kind of a big bumbling guy. He's not the best athlete on the field, but he's got great hands and he knows how to get open and make space over the middle. So I'm a buyer.
He's a pretty good athlete, though. At least he profiles pretty well. 71st percentile speed score, 84th percentile burst score, 84th percentile catch radius. Best comparable on playerprofiler.com is Austin Hooper.
That's about how I see him. Yeah. I think he's the same player as Austin Hooper, basically, and he's in a tight end friendly. Well, we don't really know what the scheme's going to be, but I think that there is a ceiling for that kid.
Yeah, I think he's a good player. I mean, I don't think he's the athlete Jonnu Smith is, and I would rather own Jonnu Smith, especially because I think Delaney Walker might be more likely to retire than Greg Olsen. But these are probably two guys that are like free right now that I think I want to go and get them, and Foster Moreau.
Can we just agree, though, that the best thing that could happen to football is that Greg Olsen retires, Booger McFarland gets fired from Monday Night Football, and Greg Olsen becomes the color analyst for that show?
100%.
I would be so happy.
Greg Olsen, I think, would be ever. I think he would be.
Did you guys
phenomenal.
watch that broadcast that he did this year, that Giants-Cardinals game?
He was awesome.
I thought he was great.
He was so good. Absolutely incredible.
And some guys are good on TV, and there's two parts of TV broadcast, sports broadcasting. It's in studio and live. Calling a live Jason Witten is not good as a live. He wasn't good as a live broadcaster. He was solid in studio when he was brought in.
Booger McFarland's okay in the studio too.
Yes, absolutely he is, but he's not good live. Greg is good in both capacities when I've seen him. I would think that would be awesome.
Greg Olsen is like almost Tony Romo level day one, which is insane.
Hey, boys.
That is insane.
My Lou Malnati's pizza is ready.
Let's do it.
All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. That's going to be all for tonight's show. Quarterbacks, tight ends. Hope we covered it. Hope we answered a lot of questions for you guys. Our year in review part 1 is over, but year in review part 2 is next week. We'll cover the running backs and the wide receivers, so that will be a huge one. That's going to be the one that most people are going to be wanting to tune into. Real quick before we go, you guys, I want your Super Bowl pick before we get started with these playoff games on Saturday. I want your Super Bowl matchup and your winner. Go, Murph.
Oh man, I totally think the Ravens coming out of the AFC. I like the Saints. And I want to go Ravens-Saints with the Ravens winning.
I'm going to go 49ers over the Ravens in an absolute shootout that goes down in history as one of the best Super Bowls of all time.
I'm Ravens-Saints too. I like that matchup. I think that the Saints can do enough to beat the 49ers. I wish that it was going to be a home game for the Saints, but
So after the 49ers beat the Saints in New Orleans, you think New Orleans is going to travel across the country and beat the 49ers in San Francisco?
I think they can do it.
So
I
before
think they
that,
can do it too. I just don't think it'll happen.
Before that, the Saints would have to go up to Lambeau and beat the Packers. That's one thing that I'm nervous about. But if there's one team that you just can't put a pulse on in the NFL, especially in the play, it's the Packers. So we don't know what to expect. But I do overall. I like the Saints better. So I have the Saints coming out of the NFC, and then I have the Chiefs coming out of the AFC. I think Andy Reid's going to get that first Super Bowl. So Chiefs.
Man,
over Saints.
can we get an AFC championship with the Chiefs and Ravens? That is going to be a fun game to watch.
Lose my mind, dude.
It'd be a nice rematch.
Great.
A nice rematch. Okay, guys. Again, it has been a blast, guys. Thank the takeaway guys, our brothers from another podcast, Joe Pollock, Murphy Hamilton. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. It was a blast, man. I can't wait till next week.
Oh yeah, it's always fun.
Big fun.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This is fun.
All right, guys. Again, thanks for hanging out with us. We will be back next week here on the RotoBros podcast for running backs and wide receivers. There is a lot to talk about there, so we are not going to waste any time. We're going to jump right into it for you guys and finish off our year in review series here with the RotoBros and the Fantasy Takeaway podcast. Thank all you guys for hanging out with us. Thanks for listening. We will be back next week with our part 2 of the year in review with the running backs and wide receivers. We've got a lot to dive into there, so we will not waste any time diving into that. You guys enjoy the first round of the playoffs. The wild card round is coming up. We got a lot of great matchups. We'll kind of dive into some of that as well toward the end of next week's show. But enjoy the games this weekend. We are out. And as always, keep balling, baby.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway.